You will never believe. He was released 18 months into his 10-year sentence due to overcrowding. Yes. This is the story of the infamous John Wayne Gacy, America's killer clown. And tonight we are not holding anything back. You're watching Crime with Face. John Wayne Gacy was born March 17, 1942, and he was the only boy out of 3 kids in a working class family. John's father, John Sr., was a World War II veteran. He was stationed in France where he served as a mechanic and a repair tech, which basically just means that he kept all of the military equipment up to par. Like many men in this time, that experience left a deep mark on him. Some would even say it would later affect the way he treated his family and his own children. During his time in the military, John Sr. was described as tough, hardworking, and a very disciplined man. Keyword, disciplined man. He was just the kind of guy who followed orders without hesitation. He would probably lay his own family out if the sergeant told him to. After returning home, those traits would return home as well, just different. They presented themselves differently at home. Back at home with his family, he was described as strict, short-tempered, and completely intolerant to 99% of things. His parenting style, if you even want to call it that, was a very authoritarian. He was very much do as I say and stay out of my face kind of parent. His service instilled in him that a man should be tough and strong. He despised anything that he perceived as a weakness, which was his son John. John would get a beating for the smallest of things, especially if he was doing something his father considered feminine or not masculine. If he was helping his mom cook, cleaning certain things, he would get an ass beating. John Sr. expected toughness, obedience, but Gacy just didn't have those traits. That's just not who Gacy was. John's mother, on the other hand, Marion was born in 1908 and grew up in a working class, modest family. She was described in many ways as a very good mother. She was very protective of John and the abuse that John's father would put him through. She always just tried to shield and protect him. Many just described Marion as gentle, comforting, and fiercely protective of her son John. They were inseparably close. Almost to a fault. Definitely to a fault. Nonetheless, she was a great mother. But I think it is important to highlight the polar opposites that John's parents were. Marion was fiercely protective. She comforted her son, coddled him to an extent. She raised him with love and kindness. He felt accepted by his mother. John's father was cold, demanding, angry, assertive. He raised John with isolation, exclusion, and he never accepted John. Growing up in that environment alone, hot and cold, one parent loves you, the next can't stand your guts, does have to be mentally exhausting. And it did play a heavy role in the psychopath that was John. So I did want to acknowledge that and just mention and touch base on the type of parents that John had. And to describe John Jr. as a child and him growing up and just to complete that dynamic, John was a very sensitive child. A sickly one at that. He did have a heart condition that hindered him from most physical activity. So he wasn't outside playing with the other kids. He was inside baking with mom, helping mom with chores, spending time with his mother. They would even just sit at the kitchen table and talk about their day and share cookies together. He truly loved his mother. John Sr.'s attitude towards John definitely caused him to be desperate for his father's approval and attention. So John Jr. would try to be everything that his father wanted. He tried to play sports even though he really wasn't supposed to, and his father just mocked him for his inability and for not being athletic enough. If he did good in school, his father would just accuse him of cheating because he was too stupid to make a good grade, God forbid. And in John's later years, he said that it felt like no matter what he did, he could not measure up to what his father expected him to be. So because of this, John began to cling to his mother for comfort, validation. It's like he expected her to regulate his emotions. And remember when I said definitely to a fault, that is where this comes into play. Because that bond eventually became too close. Codependency. He often said that he idolized his mother, even in his later adult years, calling her the only person to ever truly care about him. Which is sad. Like, I don't like this man, but that is sad. But psychologists later described their relationship as enmeshed. I put the definition right here. But it basically just means that their emotional boundaries were completely blurred. She saw him as her baby, even though he was a grown man. And he still looked to her for emotional regulation as though he were a child. Now that we have analyzed John's childhood, we can move on to his head injuries. Which, if you know anything about head injuries or serial killers, sometimes they do go hand in hand. Gacy has a bit of a history with those. One occasion, his dad knocked him unconscious with a broomstick and he was unconscious for a few hours. Another time, he was hit by a swing and was knocked unconscious. But after this one, he began experiencing blackouts, dizziness, and fainting spells, which his father criticized and accused him of lying and faking it. How the do you fake a head injury? And he just claimed that John was trying to get out of school. That he literally thought his son was fucking passing out and fainting all the time just to get out of school. But his mother, however, she noticed real changes. Blinding headaches. She also noted sudden loss of consciousness that lasted minutes at a time. A third head injury occurred when he was struck in the head with a bowling pin by a classmate. After the bowling pin incident, doctors eventually discovered a subdural hematoma, but this was in later years that blood clot was diagnosed. That just means that he lived with untreated brain damage throughout his adolescent life. And we all know that that period of time is critical to emotional and behavioral development. Do you think that head trauma could play a role in how a psychopath is made? Comment down below. I seriously want to have a discussion in the comments about this. In Gacy's high school years, nothing really changed. He tried very hard to fit in. And he was a very charming guy. Everyone said he was super charming. While he put on this super good act of this confident, sweet guy, deep down he was like super insecure. Desperate for anyone's approval. Anybody. He wants it. 1962, at 18 years old, his senior year, he dropped out of high school. He claimed it was because of his health issues and poor grades, but I really just think that he could not wait to leave his father's house. Because as soon as he dropped out, he skedaddled out of town. And he later described leaving that home as escaping a prison. After leaving Chicago, Gacy heads to Las Vegas with no money, no place to stay, and no real plan. And for a short while, he stayed in bus stations or cheap motels, just really doing odd jobs, trying to get by and get on his feet and get a foundation. Eventually, he does find work at Palm Mortuary as a janitor and a maintenance. And this was Gacy's first time even really coming close to death or seeing death. He never experienced any death growing up, and it left a significant mark on him. It definitely switched the trajectory in which he was going. And while he was staying there, Palm Mortuary actually let him stay in the embalming room because they knew he had nowhere else to go. He really liked it there. He thought, okay, this is where I'm going to plant my roots. I like the quiet. He liked the sense of importance that he got from doing work in the death industry. That only lasted a few weeks because he began to have an unusual fascination with the bodies, particularly those of young men. And one night while he was cleaning, he just kept thinking about this specific young boy's body. And he would get close to it, and he would go off and clean some more. He would peep the scenery, make sure nobody was looking, and finally, he checks to make sure everyone is gone, and he climbs in the coffin with that young boy. And he laid there for a good minute before panicking and apparently realizing that he was laying next to a dead body. You got in there. That moment apparently disturbed him so deeply that he was back in Chicago within a few days after that. Once he was back in Illinois, he applied at the Northwestern Business College in Chicago, and he started going there studying business management. And this is where he meets his first wife, Marilyn. Within the year, they got married and ended up having 2 kids together. And this is where Gacy's double life truly begins. Marilyn's father owned a few KFCs in Waterloo, Iowa, and he offered John to manage these 3 KFCs for him. So the couple moved to Iowa. Gacy worked there managing 3 franchises. Gacy was well liked amongst his employees, and he was described as a hardworking, reliable man. This really started building up his reputation, and his reputation was very important to him. He loved all the respect and attention that he got because he didn't get that growing up. That's all he ever wanted. So at this point, he's living his dream. He joined many local organizations, but one of those was JC's, a community club service where he quickly rose up the ranks. Remember, he's a manipulator, so his charisma and everything that he was obtaining, he'd only keep for so long. But by all accounts, his wife adored him. She thought she won the jackpot with John. She supported his long work hours, his accomplishments. She bragged about him. She was just very proud of their growing family. But behind the smiles and all that respect he was getting, rumors were circulating. While Marilyn thought that John was out at JC meetings serving his community, he was actually hosting parties that involved heavy drinking, porn, and sexual encounters with young men. Most of them were local teenagers. And the Waterloo JCs already had a reputation for being wild and out of control. But Gacy just took it to the next level. He just took it way too far. He would lure these young boys and men in, oftentimes his own employees, with the promise of alcohol, porn, money. Keep in mind, these are young boys, so they don't have access to any of these things, and here comes this cool guy offering them these things. Of course they're going to trust him. Of course they're going to think that that's their friend. But he would promise these things, and most of the time he would deliver, but they always followed with sexual advances. You had to do something to get something from John. And at first he kept these things pretty low-key, pretty secret, but like I said, there were rumors. And in 1968, Gacy's double life finally caught up to him. He was charged and arrested with SAing a 15-year-old boy, Donald Voorhees, the son of a fellow JC's member. When the accusation first surfaced, it destroyed that perfect little reputation that he had in Waterloo overnight. People was not with him. And Marilyn, she was humiliated and confused. Like, what? My man? She didn't even believe it at first. She swore it was just some kind of misunderstanding. Which, girl, but more boys started to come forward. And it wasn't just an accusation anymore. In 1968, Gacy was charged and convicted of sodomy, sentenced to 10 years in the penitentiary. Marilyn almost immediately filed divorce from his ass. She was done, which, girl, took you long enough, but and one of the reasons in her divorce was mental cruelty. Yeah. She was granted full custody of their 2 kids, and Gacy was never allowed to see them again. Even in prison, Gacy acclimated and manipulated. He did not stop his shenanigans just because he was in prison. While in prison, he managed to become head cook, took on many leadership roles, volunteered for many jobs, and became a model prisoner. And because of this, and you will never believe, he was released 18 months into his 10-year sentence due to overcrowding. Yes, a monster was released 18 months into his 10-year sentence because of overcrowding in the prison. Wonder if all of this could have been prevented. After Gacy's release, he remarries to a young woman from Chicago named Carol Hoff. They previously knew each other, but ended up marrying other people, and later on down the road, unfortunately, that poor woman reconnected with him. But by the 1970s, they do purchase a home in the suburbs of Chicago, and Gacy starts his own contracting business, PDM Contractors. And he used that business as a way to lure young men and to lure his victims. He liked to hire young men, some still in their teens, and he would offer them jobs, cash, and opportunity. But behind the scenes, he was obviously just grooming them. By the mid-1970s, he had repaired his once cracked double life, and he had perfected the art of living a double life. He had gotten really good at it. To the outside world, he was a devoted stepfather, a loving husband, a successful contractor, and a community leader. But cracks were starting to form again, and he was progressing so quickly because it started off small. Not small, smaller than what he ends up doing. At first, he would lure the victims to his basement with the promise of drugs and money and a good time. But once inside, he would drug them, restrain them, and sexually assault them. But after, he would release them. But over time, he stopped getting the thrill, and he wanted that thrill back. That was when he came across his first murder victim, Timothy McCoy, a 16-year-old boy from Iowa. Which is weird because that's very weird. But this boy was traveling to his father's home in Omaha, Nebraska. On January 3rd, 1972, McCoy was at the Chicago Greyhound bus terminal awaiting his connecting bus to Nebraska as he was visiting his father. And Gacy, all charismatic, approaches him, tells him, it's too cold to be waiting out here. Just come stay at my house and I'll bring you to your connecting bus in the morning. Unfortunately, McCoy does decide to go with Gacy. He was never seen again. Gacy stabbed him multiple times in the chest and buried him in the crawl space beneath his home. He never made it to go see his father. And for years, McCoy's body was unidentified and referred to as Body 9, case number 1279, December 78. He was also known as the Greyhound Boy. Most, if not all of his victims were young men and teenagers. More times than not, they were runaways and or extremely vulnerable. And this made it so easy for Gacy to manipulate them and to get away with his crimes for such a long time because these were passerbys. He wasn't killing people from his job like that. He was killing passerbys, which is a whole nother topic, and we can make a whole video about that. After killing them, he always hid them in the basement or the crawl space of his house, sometimes even under the floorboards of his home. And he wondered why. Like, everyone that went to the Gacy's home, even his wife, her kids, his stepchildren, everyone said the home stunk so bad, and his excuses were always bad plumbing. He just a dead animal under that. He just always had an excuse as to what the smell was. And he kept doing this. It was a routine for him, if you will. And he started running out of room. That's how many people he was killing. He started running out of room in all these spaces. And once he ran out of room, he started wrapping them in plastic tarps and just burying them on the property. And by the time his crimes were discovered, Gacy had murdered 33, though the number could be higher. 33 young men were killed by Gacy. I'm sure you're probably wondering, how did he get away with it for so long? And how exactly did they catch him for these crimes? Well, on December 11th, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Peist went missing. He told his mom he was going to talk to a contractor about a job, and he was never seen again. That contractor was Gacy. When police questioned him about it the next day, he acted annoyed, defensive, and insisted he never even met Robert. But the police were not buying that. So they put him on 24-hour surveillance. And during that time, Gacy spiraled. He even told police officers following him, "You're gonna hear about me one day." Police finally obtained a search warrant, and after getting inside Gacy's house, they were immediately suspicious and overwhelmed with the gut feeling that something was wrong. Just in Gacy's home, they found a receipt from the pharmacy that the young boy who went missing was last seen at on the day he disappeared, handcuffs, someone's class ring, clothes that obviously didn't belong to Gacy's ass. And this wasn't enough to arrest Gacy, but it was enough to know that something's up and they needed to figure it out. On December 21st, 1978, the police searched the crawl space. And that is when they uncover the 33 bodies under Gacy's house. Well, 29 were under the house and 4 of them were scattered in Gacy's yard. Gacy was arrested and sentenced to 21 death sentences and 21 life sentences. And May 10th, 1994, after multiple appeals, Gacy was executed by lethal injection at 52 years old after serving 14 years. His final words were reportedly, "Kiss my ass." That was today's story. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.